I hand you a chart. How do you jumpstart the process?
In traditional astrology, the only way to start reading a chart is from the first house. And that is, in terms of the 16th century, that continues to be true. In terms of the period before that, in terms of the medieval period, that also was true. And I think when we go further back into more traditional or into more classical styles of astrology, then we fall into this thing of looking for the sect ruler of the charts and doing it from that, and then the triplicity rulers of the insect luminary, and that being the way how to begin. But from, I dare say, the 1300s straight up until the 1800s, the way to start reading a chart is always from the first house.
Right.
So that's how I begin my work.
And were there a few Elizabethan authors maybe that also would take the house the sun was in or the moon was in and treat that as a first house too?
No, absolutely no one.
All right.
Yeah, the sun and the moon, the sun and the moon and the sun and the moon between the medieval period and the Renaissance were important because they're the luminaries, and so there's a way how we treat them that's separate and apart from our larger chart interpretation. But in the context of the actual chart interpretation, the sun and the moon are only as important as the houses that they rule. So you're never going to start a reading by first assessing the sun unless the sun is the specific ruler of the ascendant, or unless the sun is specifically in the first house. You'll never start a reading by assessing the moon first unless the moon is the specific ruler of the ascendant, or unless the moon is in the first house or aspecting the first house. So the luminaries, they lose a lot of their esteem. You know, today we tend to talk about the big three, but there is no big three model in traditional astrology. You start with the ascendant, aspects to the ascendant, planets in the first house, aspects to the ruler of the first house. And if the sun and the moon aren't any of those things, then they just aren't important until we get to the house where their signs land on the cusp of.
Have you investigated the interesting technique of equal houses derived from the midheaven?
No, I have. I mean, if you're talking about the MC houses within the Uranian context, then yes, I have within the context of Uranian astrology. But when it comes to my houses work in a traditional capacity, I only use Regiomontanus.
Okay, fantastic. And is there any particular reason you use Regiomontanus apart from the fact that it was the most popular house system in the 1600s and 1700s?
I use Regiomontanus because that was the house system that all of the astrology that I tend to teach at my school from a traditional perspective is really rooted in the 1600s. And so I teach the work of Jean-Baptiste Morin, I teach the work of John Gadbury, I teach the work of Joseph Blagrave, and they all use Regiomontanus. So since all of their systems and their knowledge was codified using that house system, that's the house system that I teach with.
I think Regiomontanus means king of the mountain or something.
It was a
Translates the man from the Purple Mountain. I'm trying to remember.
possibly. I mean, I know it was a moniker, or it was a nickname for Johannes Mueller, and or Johannes Königsberg Mueller or something like that was his name. But there wasn't really a person called Regiomontanus in
Okay.
the same way as there was a Tito de Placidus.
Would it be safe to say that you see astrology as a tool for enlightenment, mental clarity, and as a fast track to spiritual truth?
Yeah, I think that astrology has the ability to plug us into a magical understanding of ourselves and the world in which we live. And I think that that's really our responsibility as astrologers to bring back a foundational magic for people to know that, hey, this thing exists and there is a ghost within the machine, and we're not just here to live and die and be no more, but we're actually here to participate in something beautiful and mysterious and exotic and exciting. And I think that astrology for me is one of the touchstones of genuine magic within this world. And I know that that's what it does for other people as well. So that's how I try to share it with people so that people could live with this magic in a practical way and so that they could feel as if they have a direct connection to whatever they think God is by means of the astrology that we practice. Astrology is so wonderful, and those of us who practice astrology, we owe so much to astrology for making us who we are. And I was thinking the other day that within astrology, especially within this generation in 2024, so many people have the opportunity to dub themselves as celebrities because of what astrology has done for them. And I think,
Or influencers, right? It
well,
does make things shallow. Or I always worry about the generation of astrologers that are getting their main education from Facebook, you know?
yeah, yeah. And so I think that as a community, it just we owe it to astrology to do better astrology, to do more incisive astrology, to really make sure that we know what we're doing and how we're doing it, because there is going to come a day when the larger world turns to us and asks us for the evidence of what we've been doing all these decades and millennia. And I really hope that as a community, we have something strong to show the world so that we aren't ridiculed into the freak show back end of the closet for the next 80 years, but so that we actually can say, hey, this is a robust system. We believe it because it works. And here's the evidence of this astrology working. So I hope that that's someplace that we could all move towards together as a community.